The issue was that drove a wedge between Donald Trump and some of his biggest supportive Republican women, like Nancy Mace, like Lauren Boebert, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it was the Epstein files. And as much as I disagree with them, some of them are still in Congress on so many things, I do give them credit for not having bent the knee when he brought Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room and tried to bully her into not voting for the release of the files.
Before we talk about whether Democrats should welcome Marjorie Taylor Greene back from the political wilderness, I need you to sit with one thing David Hogg said at that table that almost got buried under the debate about grace and coalition building. This man was 18 years old. He had just survived a mass shooting at his high school. He came to Capitol Hill with his fellow survivors from March for Our Lives to lobby members of Congress for gun reform. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, before she was even elected, chased him through those halls, calling him a crisis actor, telling anyone who would listen that the massacre that killed his classmates did not happen, that he was a paid government plant, that the whole thing was staged. He was 18, and she hunted him through the halls of Congress. Now, Scott Jennings wants to know why Democrats cannot just extend a little grace. But here's the thing about this particular MTG and Trump breakup that nobody on that panel said clearly enough. There is a receipt, on the record, in the New York Times Magazine, from Marjorie Taylor Greene herself. And what that receipt says about why this break actually happened is more important than anything said in that debate. Hit that like button, subscribe to Kelly Takeover, and let's put every piece of this on the record. Let's go.
Even if you say that the only thing that is important about those three individuals in particular is that they're anti-Semitic, what does it say about the president that he was totally fine with them 6 months ago?
Well, and they were totally fine with him.
What does it say?
Look, he attracted a lot of people. And some of the people that he attracted, like, that have those views, I completely and totally disagree with. And he has been quite clear about his views on these issues. And he has led the party away from those views. And that's frankly one of the reasons they're not in it anymore.
He spoke on the phone with Tucker Carlson about 6 weeks ago.
What did he say? What did he say about him last week?
But why? I mean, look, you're arguing to me that they are repulsive people who are anti-Semitic. The president of the United States is on the phone with them.
He disavowed them last week.
I'm just saying.
Let us start with the receipt, because it is the part of this story that changes everything, and it came directly from Marjorie Taylor Greene's own account. She told the New York Times Magazine on the record that Trump personally told her he opposed releasing the Epstein files because, in his words, his friends would get hurt. She said this was in the last conversation the two of them had. After she stood with Epstein survivors at a September press conference, he called her a traitor. By November, she announced she was resigning rather than face a primary he would fund against her. Read that again slowly. The President of the United States told a sitting member of Congress that releasing files about a convicted child sex trafficker's client network would hurt his friends. Those are his words as reported by Greene herself. Not a leak. Not an anonymous source. Marjorie Taylor Greene on the record telling the New York Times what Trump said to her face. That is not a values disagreement. That is not an ideological evolution. That is a woman describing plainly being told the quiet part out loud by the president and then being threatened with a funded primary when she did not comply. The break between MTG and Trump is not a story about conscience. It is a story about coercion. And the conscience narrative only holds if you do not read what she actually said about why it happened. Now let us talk about the polling, because the timing of these defections is not coincidental, and the data makes that visible. According to CBS News and YouGov polling from May of this year, Trump's net approval among white non-college educated adults, the demographic that won him both elections, collapsed from plus 36 points in February of last year to minus 8 points in May. That is a 44-point fall in the group that was his most reliable foundation. Not a dip, not a fluctuation, a collapse. And it happened in the months that inflation hit, the Iran war dragged on, and the economic promises of the 2024 campaign started running into the reality of what the administration actually delivered. Marjorie Taylor Greene did not have a moral awakening. The polling moved, and the political defection followed the polling. That is the sequence. That is always the sequence. The loyalty runs exactly as deep as the approval numbers and not 1 point deeper. Scott Jennings spent that entire segment managing this story, calling these figures repulsive and anti-Semitic while also defending the president who was on the phone with Tucker Carlson 6 weeks ago and who disavowed them last week as if a week-old disavowal erases years of active embrace. David Hogg asked the question that collapsed that entire frame. If they are repulsive, what does it say about the president that he was totally fine with them 6 months ago? Scott Jennings did not answer it. He could not answer it honestly, because the honest answer is that the president was fine with them because they were useful to him and stopped being useful when the polling moved, and the Epstein file situation made them a liability. That is not leadership. That is transaction. And David Hogg named it from a position of personal experience that no amount of panel spin can touch. He was 18 years old when that woman chased him through Capitol Hill. He has more right than anyone at that table to set the conditions for what grace looks like when it gets offered. And what he offered was not a slammed door. He said, "Come on the show. Answer for it directly. Prove it." That is a door left open with a condition attached. A completely reasonable condition from a man who was hunted through a federal building as a teenager by the person now asking for acceptance. Here is the pattern that this whole situation fits into, and it is bigger than MTG and bigger than this panel. History already ran this experiment with Joseph McCarthy. The senators who backed him loudest. The media figures who amplified him. The political operatives who made their careers in his orbit. When public opinion turned, they did not stand up and say they were wrong. They quietly rewrote their stories, found reasons they had always had private reservations, attached themselves to whatever came next, and hoped nobody kept the tapes. That is the bet every single MAGA defector is making right now. That the relief of seeing them break with Trump will be enough that nobody looks too carefully at the timing. That a 44-point polling collapse in the base will be accepted as a moral evolution. That showing up after the numbers moved will be treated the same as showing up when it costs something. It will not. Not here. Not on Kelly Takeover. The receipt is in the New York Times Magazine. Trump told MTG his friends would get hurt. She stood with Epstein survivors anyway. He called her a traitor and threatened her seat. She is leaving. That is the whole story, and it has nothing to do with conscience. Drop a comment below. If Trump told a member of Congress that releasing the Epstein files would hurt his friends, what do you think that means, and why is nobody at that panel asking that follow-up question? I want to know what you think. Subscribe to Kelly Takeover because we are reading every on-the-record statement, and we are not letting the conscience narrative replace the documented one. See you in the next one.